everybody, and welcome to the Positively Disney phone-in show. I'm Kimberly Bouchard, your host and the author of the Positively Disney book series. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so excited to share my adventures in San Jose, California, about this amazing musical, Spoonful of Sherman, with you in a little bit. It's just been absolutely outstanding, and I learned so much about that family over the weekend. Before I go, I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight, from my Twitch TV people to my Facebook people. And I noticed Gina's on and Donna's on, Regina's on. Thank you for joining me tonight, you guys. I want to also thank my sponsor, Michelle McCune over at Years of Experience. You can reach her at MMCKEOWN at themouseexperts.com, and she will put together an amazing vacation for you. And you will even have text access to her in the parks while you are on your vacation. She specializes with the military, concierge service, and special needs families. So if you want a fantastic vacation, give her a call. Tell her I sent you. Her number to call is 732-735-1779. Something that I also wanted to introduce to you tonight, and I will be mentioning it as many times as I have to on my podcast in the future. But there is an amazing Disney fan meetup happening in Pennsylvania, a brand new convention, Disney Fandom it's called, and it's going to be all things Disney, including Marvel and Star Wars. And that is going to be so fantastic. Allentown, August 10th. They have family activities, they have vendors, they have Disney experts, a panel, interactive panel from all over the country. I'm going to be speaking there, debuting my Star Wars book, and showing you some amazing photos and sharing stories. And it's all raising money for a couple of charities. One of the charities that I support, a Moment of Magic Foundation, where college kids dress as princesses, princes, superheroes, and visit the medically vulnerable children in hospitals. It's called a Moment of Magic Foundation, and that's one of the things I'll be supporting while there. So I had the most amazing weekend. I couldn't even believe that I was in San Jose sharing the weekend with Robbie Sherman of the Robert Sherman's son and Richard Sherman's nephew, along with his amazing stage play. Before I go on, I just want to welcome actually Kim. Hi, Andrew from Ohio, and Mike joining me. Thank you. So I've got a lot to tell you guys because, as I said, I didn't know this was all going to come about until I got an invitation a few weeks ago and decided to fly out to San Jose to see it. And it all began with dinner that Robbie was hosting for several of us prior to the theater. As I was walking from my hotel to the restaurant, it was so metaphoric because I actually was walking along with some of the cast and crew from Aladdin that was playing there in San Jose as well. And I thought it was just very metaphorical for that, what was the magic that was going to happen later on in the night. And, once I got to the theater, by the way, the show is at the Three Below Theater and Lounge in San Jose. It's a great theater, lots of activities. It's a family-owned theater, and I walked in there and fell in love with the set. They actually brought the set over from London to perform this. And I was looking for something on the set that I remember Robbie telling me when I talked to him about a year ago about different things about his family. And at any rate, walking in there at this beautiful set up, there was two pianos. And what I was looking for was the coffee mug with pencils in it, because his father and uncle, when they were writing songs, they'd always have this mug on the piano with the pencils. Now, for the live show purposes, they couldn't have the mug on the piano, or it probably would have gone flying off. But I did see it on the set. At any rate, it was an award-winning set from a young woman who's 27 years old back in London. They brought it over, so it was going to be pretty special, I could see from there. The whole, performance, it's a two-act performance that, went through the history of the Sherman family. They just last year, celebrated 100 years of songwriting, and it didn't just start with, the Sherman brothers. It actually started with their dad, Al Sherman, and how it got started is really interesting. So, they only had each other. They there were no other siblings, and Robert actually went to study, English literature, and he also was, studying painting, and Richard was studying music and, was writing some songs, the music to the different, songs in back in college. And, their dad, who was also a songwriter, he challenged his sons. He said, "Oh," he said, "I don't know what an English major and a music major could do. I don't think you guys would be able to write a hit song, could you?" Well, the boys kind of took up the challenge and they wrote their very first song together. And the song was called Tall Paul. And it was actually sung by Annette Funicello, who is one of the original Mouseketeers. We all know Annette Funicello. And it was her first hit song on the top 10 chart list. And it's really interesting because it was because of that song. If you guys have a chance to Google it, it's really fun. That is what caught Walt Disney's attention in the first place, the hit song Tall Paul. Well, he reached out to the Sherman Brothers and he invited them to provide a song. He sent the script for a movie called Horse Masters, and the song was called the Strumming Song. And he thought that, these guys, he heard something. He believed in something. These guys are rock and roll songwriters and that, but Walt heard something from these guys and decided to call upon them. So they got the song written there, called into Walt's office. Walt was started chatting away and he started talking about an entire different picture. He started talking about a picture that he was working on and telling them all about these infant twins that were separated at birth and grew up in separate places and how they got together. And as the brothers were sitting there because they were young, in their 20s. They were listening, and Robert got up the nerve to say, "Excuse me, Mr. Disney." By the way, Walt wanted to be called Walt. He never liked to be called Mr. Disney, but he said, "Mr. Disney, this is not the song. This doesn't sound like anything that you gave us a script about." And he said, "We're here to show you the song, the Strumming Song from the Horse Masters." And Walt said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" So the brothers went and started to perform their song, sang this song, and Walt had his back to them at the window. He said, "Yeah, that'll do." It was just a simple, "Yeah, that'll do." And Walt felt bad for wasting their time. He said, he said, "Why don't you maybe see if you can write me a song for my next picture." Well, that picture was called The Parent Trap with Haley Mills, and the song was called Let's Get Together. When they walked out of there, they did not realize really at that point what had happened, but a few people in the office did, and they were shaking their hands and said, "You know what just happened? You got a two-picture deal with Walt Disney." Well, guys, that's where it all started. Just want to welcome on Michelle as well, and some of the other folks on Twitch TV. So there were 55 songs. Some medleys were done to include these 55 songs because that's an amazing number of songs. Songs that some of them were new, a lot of them brought back memories from my childhood. And a lot of the songs, some of the songs I didn't even realize that the Shermans had any part in, actually. And anyways, so here we are listening to these amazing, amazing music. It was so upbeat. There were two pianos, there were six actors and singers and all that, and enjoying the show. And during the show, of course, as I said, they had about 55 different songs. But what came up were these particular shows that I want to share with you because I mean, they couldn't cover all of them, of course. But of course, Mary Poppins, we all know, they sung Supercalifragilistic, Feed the Birds was so epic. It brought tears to, I'm sure, most of our eyes. It was just so well done by one of the singers, and she was actually trained in opera, so you can imagine that song. Spoonful of Sugar was another one, and Fly a Kite, which everybody wanted to sing that song. I was kind of singing it quietly, but I didn't want to ruin the evening. But at any rate, Mary Poppins was one of the featured films that they had shared the songs with. Another film that I really, really loved, you guys, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, that lovely car that could fly, that could float and all of that. And really loved the presentation of that Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And then I don't know if you remember this, but in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, there is a scene with a music box dancer, the lead. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she pretends to be a music box dancer. And the way they performed it, they actually had somebody doing the sounds of like a cranking sound every time she moved. It was sung beautifully, and it was absolutely wonderful to watch. Um, Something I don't know why I didn't know this before, but the Shermans also wrote and produced the songs for the Tigger movie. So, Heffalumps and Woozles is their song. Winnie the Pooh is their song. Wonderful Thing About Tiggers is their song. I had no idea, and it was performed and presented just brilliantly. Another, movie songs that they had done was Jungle Book, I Wanna Be Like You. They did the songs for the Jungle Book, everything except for Bare Necessities, and it was just really amazing. Some of the other songs that movies, films that you would be familiar with, I'm sure, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Aristocats, Tom Sawyer, Charlotte's Web, those kinds of things. And it was really interesting. I had just been in touch with um some folks in the Hollywood area and was reminded that actually Debbie Reynolds, Carrie Fisher and Todd Fisher's mom, was the voice of Charlotte. And I'm just kind of wondering if that's why I don't kill spiders. I always remove the spiders from my house if I find one and put it outside. But anyways, that's just an aside. Something about Walt and the Shermans were they were actually very close, in a sense, as close as families could be. I mean, Walt was all about family, and so were the Sherman brothers. And Walt was very good to them and the families of the studio. And actually, every time there was going to be a movie premiering, he would invite the people that worked at the studios and their families to join together and go to the theater on the lot to watch the movie. And although Robbie was born after a couple years after Walt had passed away, his three other siblings actually had met Walt Disney, and his mom had shared this story, and I thought it was so sweet. She was a very busy mom, young mom of three children, and she sat between Walt and her husband, Robert. And she proceeded to fall asleep as the lights dimmed and the movie began. And she fell asleep on Walt's shoulder, and he didn't move throughout the whole movie, letting Robert's wife, Joyce, Robbie's mom, sleep on his shoulder, which I thought was really precious. But another thing that I wanted to share with you about the family is, as I said, the kindness of Walt. I'd mentioned last week that I just had met a fellow that had met Walt when he was a little boy, and he said he just came across as a very welcoming, very genuine, very grandfatherly man. And, when he found out that Robert Sherman had a bad back, he sought out the manufacturer of the rocking chair that John F. Kennedy had for his bad back and got one made for Robert Sherman, which I thought was really kind. I mean, to have a boss that cares enough and thinks about your well-being, I think is really neat. Another thing that Walt was kind enough to the brothers is that he would give them the keys to his Palm Springs home for weekends for the families to get together or to relax and spend some time. Because, I mean, they worked hard, those guys. They worked really hard at working at the songwriting and that of so many hits. And there's more about that story actually in my fourth book of Positively Disney. Robbie's stories in there. It's called A Step in Time, and it's got some neat things in there about the Sherman brothers. Well, I want to go on. And by the way, if anybody wants to ask me any questions or whatever, I'm watching the screen here. Feel free to ask anything you'd like. That's by far the best way to communicate at this point. I want to share with you some other things about the Sherman brothers that some of you may know, some of you may not know, but they were also involved in writing some of the songs for the attractions. One of them is one of my favorite attractions, Carousel of Progress in Walt Disney World. One of the attractions rides actually that was debuted at the World's Fair, along with It's a Small World. But I'll get to It's a Small World in a moment. And what's really kind of neat is above the screen at Carousel of Progress, you can actually see the Sherman Brothers kind of working away at their piano and working on the song. Robbie had been asked the question whether his dad and uncle wrote songs in his living room and he or worked, at home. He said, but mostly they worked outside of their home. But when you've got musicians and songwriters around and there's a piano, they would be they try out maybe 100 times the same stanza or maybe a line to a song, and they'd kind of work it out, in the middle of the living room, which Robbie, when he was younger, didn't realize that they were actually working. But I have a story also about the Journey into Imagination at Walt Disney World at Epcot had the song that the Sherman brothers had written, composed, called One Little Spark. And one day, Robbie's dad, Robert, came into his room and asked to borrow his slide whistle. And you guys, we had a lot of fun with those as kids. I'm sure they still sell them, but they're actually, the little whistle. It's just a little whistle, and it kind of has a little part that you pull out. And it kind of makes that funny sound up. It goes up and down. Anyways, Robbie was in his room. He had a little keyboard and a few other little things. And his dad said they were working on a song, and could he please borrow his slide whistle? And a couple days later, his dad gave it back. Said, "Yeah," I said, they've got the song, they've got it." And that song was One Little Spark. So at the end of that song, you'll hear a little zoop, with a slide whistle. And that is Robbie's whistle that his dad borrowed. And his dad actually liked to include little sounds like that during different songs. So if you hear sort of a little odd whistle or whatever, that's Robert. That's Robbie's dad, creating these little interesting little sounds to add to the songs. Another song that they created was for the Tiki Room, the Tiki Room, if you guys know about that one. And it was really fun. The people I was sitting beside at the theater had all three of them were wearing like matching tiki type of attire. She was in a skirt with parrots and macaws and all that over it. He was in a shirt, and their daughter was dressed as well, because that was like their favorite attraction. It was quite fun. I want to get to an attraction that I think is something that is definitely given me pause for thought now after hearing on the stage this past weekend and knowing a little bit more about the history of it. A lot of folks, actually, before I go on, I just want to welcome my husband, who's actually in Singapore right now. Thank you for joining me. And Lynn, thank you for joining me as well tonight. So I want the attraction, It's a Small World, sometimes gets a little bit of a bad rap because it's been there forever. And actually it is, I think it's the most played song ever in the history of songs. But in 1963, there was something, some of you guys might remember this history, or been around even. It was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was a really, really scary time for the world, thinking that, we were going to have an Armageddon. And at any rate, after that passed, Walt approached the Shermans to write a song that would bring the world together, and a song about peace, a song about children. And it was titled first Children of the World, and it was going to be debuting at the World's Fair. By the way, um, Mary Poppins and It's a Small World debuted, both of them, in 1964, which is kind of cool because they won awards, so many awards for the songs, and they actually debuted the same year. But at any rate, um, so it's the most performed song of all time. And I don't know, I was looking all over the internet for this final stanza that I'd heard about in the show. And then Robbie had sent me the PDF of something, and it was on there, which I had actually had anyways. So January 2011, it was a frosty January morning. And the Sherman brothers were asked, not by Walt, obviously, he had passed, but were asked to write, and he was asked to write an additional stanza for It's a Small World. And I'll tell you, they sung it at that show, and most of us had tears rolling down our eyes because it was so precious to know the reason why that's the whole It's a Small World came about. Why? I mean, Walt was really wanted in his own way to kind of somehow bring the world together. And that's where It's a Small World comes from. And I just want to share with you right now that last stanza. And so hopefully I can do it without getting choked up. But this is it. And this was sung beautifully. I'm not going to sing it for you though, guys. I'm just going to read it. It's a world of wonder, a world of worth, and in years to come, we'll know peace on earth. We will open our eyes and we'll all realize it's a small world after all. That hit so many of us in that crowd. And I mean, we were from all over. There was people that drove like hours and hours from all over California, people flying in from everywhere to see that debut of this show Saturday night in San Jose. And that just brought it together so well. And by the way, you can actually get the CD, A Spoonful of Sherman. It is the from the UK and Ireland tour it did in 2018. You can get that on Amazon. And I just have to say, it was one of the most memorable moments to have experienced such iconic songs with Robbie himself at the theater. And we got to spend some more time, after the production, and for the rest of the weekend. But the Shermans were about family. They were, I would say, a typical family in the sense that there was a lot of um, love shared between them, very strong and powerful connections between the siblings and their parents. And, Walt was all about family too. And anybody that knows me knows that family is my word. And if you guys want to be able to attend this show, it is in San Jose playing it's called Three Below Theater and Lounge until about May 5th. And it's the first time it's hit North American soil. I really want to see it in Seattle. So I'm going to see what I can do to get that show in our neck of the woods here because it's really a history of something very powerful of a family that has 100 years of songwriting. It's absolutely crazy. By the way, if you want to find Robbie Sherman and more information on a regular basis about the Sherman Brothers, you can find him on Facebook in groups. And it's just basically the group is called Sherman Brothers. And you can go on there, and he's very good about posting different things throughout the weeks, different iconic things, the songs, and so on and so forth. So, but anyways, I just really wanted to share that with you tonight. And getting to know Robbie was really delightful. I'll say I didn't know that he had met Lassie. Does everybody remember that beautiful dog Lassie, who actually was a she, not a he? He actually met Lassie. He's been very fortunate to be part of the Sherman um, family. And when we were talking a few weeks ago, and he knew, he found out I was writing the Star Wars edition of the book, he told me he actually met Mark Hamill on the red carpet at the Academy Awards. I thought, gosh, that would have been really, really cool. But, anyways, just a wonderful human being. Robbie is an award winning songwriter himself, composer, producer. He's written for film, he's written for television, and he's got a lot of works to his name. The Shermans didn't only write songs for Disney, they do have other songs that I never even knew, and you would recognize them. And I don't want to spoil it for you because it is really a nice surprise to find out some of the different songs that they do sing have performed and written for others to sing on their CD. And yeah, so that was my weekend, guys, and very happy to have had that opportunity. Feel very blessed. It was something that I had no idea a month ago that I was going to be a part of, and it was just wonderful. So that's pretty much all I have tonight for you. Although I do want to tell you about Robbie's book of his father, who Robert was actually, he had a nickname called Moose, and it's the book is about his father's life, and really, really lovely book. You can get on Amazon as well. So just check it out on Amazon, the pages of his father's life. I think I might even have a little, oh boy, I might have a little ad for it in my little book here. I'm going to just take a quick look for it. Moose, it's called Chapters from My Life. So Moose, Chapters from My Life, and it's about Robert Sherman and his songwriting, the song part of the songwriting duo, the Sherman Brothers. With that, folks, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of time with me this evening. I look forward to seeing you next week when I'm going to be talking about the Star Wars celebration and all that had to do. It's just finished today up in Chicago, and wanted to share a little bit about that with you. That will be my 60th podcast, and I'm kind of in shock because when I started podcasting, it was more to share stories and experiences with you and have you share some with me because I can only write so fast, of course. But I had no idea that I will get to my 60th podcast next week. So I'm really excited about that. And again, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Please be well, be safe, and take care. Until next time. Bye for now.